scales do this. And when it comes to indicating the direction of the difference, what is the meaning of direction of the difference? It means whether the first group is better than the second group or second group is better than the first group. In other words, whether A is good, B is bad, or A is bad, B is good. When I compare A and B, we can simply say A and B. They are two different ones. If that is the case, then we are not able to find the direction of the difference. But if I say A is better than B, then we also have the direction. So when it comes to nominal scale, it will not help us in finding the direction, whereas ordinal scale helps us, interval scale helps us, and ratio scale also helps us in finding the direction in which the difference occurs in the given categories. Now, as we discussed about the ordinal scale, the difference between the first and the second could be different from the difference between the second and the third, and third and the fourth and the fifth, so on. But it will not help you to understand what is the difference between the first and the second. It only shows the direction. If I say A is better than B, how much A is better than B, we do not know in an ordinal scale. But when we talk about an interval scale, it helps us in even identifying the amount of difference. For example, if I say today's temperature is 23 degrees centigrade and yesterday at the same time the temperature was 25 degrees centigrade, I not only know that the temperature today is less than yesterday, I also know that the temperature is 2 degrees less than yesterday. So it indicates the difference, it indicates the direction of difference, and also it indicates the amount of difference. But that does not happen in ordinal scale and nominal scale. And when it comes to ratio scale, basically ratio scale means actual counting or actual measurement, and therefore it indicates difference, it indicates direction of difference, it indicates the amount of difference. But as we understood earlier, in the case of temperature, zero temperature does not mean it is non-existence of temperature, means there is no question of absolute zero. But when we talk about ratio scale, zero means absence. Therefore, absolute zero exists. So this is a quick look at different measurement scales. Now, shall we have a quick check whether you have understood or not? I'm giving you one small example. Can you tell me what is the scale that we have used? Nominal, ordinal, ratio, or interval? Variable here is gender. It is male and female, and we call male as 1 and female as 2. So is it a nominal scale, ordinal scale, ratio scale, or interval scale? What do you think is this scale used for the variable called gender? One answer says nominal. Any other person answering this? Others are thinking. You need to be fast. Okay, nominal. One more answer also is coming as nominal. Yes, the answer is nominal because gender, we are categorizing it as male and female, but that's only differentiating group 1 with group 2, but it does not show the direction of difference or the gap between the difference. We don't have any such things here. And we are also, even when we talk about 1 and 2, it is who are giving it as 1 and 2. I can always say male is 2 and female is 1, right? It does not really matter. Okay, next example. Which of the following weight category do you fall in? If this is the question I'm asking, and I'm giving you these different possible options, which scale are we using? Nominal, ordinal, interval or ratio? Quick. Is it nominal or ordinal or interval or ratio? Interval. One participant is writing it as interval. Okay. One more is saying interval. Any other answer from anybody? Interval. One more says interval. Okay. Before I give the answer, can you tell me what is the variable here? Many of you are writing it as interval. Fine, good. What is a variable under study? Weight. Okay, weight, is it countable or measurable, or what type of a variable is this? Weight is, it's a measurable, okay. We usually measure weight in maybe grams or kilograms, right? It's measurable, yes, not countable, it's measurable, very good. We measure weight in terms of either the units of measurement here, scientific unit of measurement could be either grams or it could be kilograms. And rarely we use even pounds, but it's not very familiar to us. But Europeans go with pounds. Okay. It's a category of weight. Okay, very good. Measurable in the units of kgs, etc. Okay, so when we measure weight in kilograms, and if I ask you what is your weight, forget that I'm asking you to tick mark any one of the weight category. I'm simply asking you weight. You would say I'm 61.3 kgs, or somebody would say I'm 58.7 kgs. Somebody else may say I'm 45.2 kgs. Somebody else might say I'm 92 kgs. When I answer these numbers, if I'm saying that I'm 45 kgs, I only tick mark the option 40 to 60. It does not mean that I can be anywhere between 40 and 60. Understood? So weight here is a continuous variable. I mentioned about continuous variable. Weight here is a continuous variable. It's a measurable variable. So it's a continuous variable. When we talk about a continuous variable like weight, and when I ask you to tell me your weight, you tell me the actual value. It is not an interval scale here that we are using, though it looks like an interval scale. We are actually using a ratio scale. Okay, this is a ratio scale example where the answers are classified into some intervals. Okay, but the weight is a continuous variable and the variable is asked in a ratio scale manner. The question here is, which of the following weight category do you fall into? Just because it is classified into smaller group, the weight category does not become an interval scale. It is a ratio scale. Next. How do you rate Geo app? If I ask you this question, how do you rate Geo app? Is it nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio? Is it nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio? Ordinal. Somebody says ordinal. Any other answers? Okay, many of you are saying ordinal and it is correct. Why is it ordinal? Excellent, we know, is better than very good. Very good is actually better than good, and good is better than bad, and bad is better than poor. So we have organized the opinion of the user in different categories. And we also know the different categories are different. We can compare. And also we know what is better and what is not so better. But how much is the difference between excellent and very good as compared to very good and good? I don't know. Right? So here, though we can say that excellent is always better than the previous other one, how much is the gap between the two successive responses? I do not know. Therefore, it is ordinal. Quickly, one more. If I'm asking you to measure time, let's say time taken to complete a work. Nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio? Ordinal. Is it ordinal or nominal? Nominal. Answer is nominal. Answer is interval. Answer is nominal. Okay, answer is ordinal. Just think of the table which I just now showed before this slide. If I say time taken to complete the work, can I categorize all those people who take 5 minutes, who take 10 minutes, who take 15 minutes into different categories? I can do that. And also, if I ask, if I want to compare who has done faster, I can do that. Somebody who does it in 5 minutes has done it faster than somebody who has done it in 15 minutes. So second classification is true. And the third part, can I know how much is the difference between each group? It is again yes, because first group within 5 minutes, next group has taken more than 5 minutes. So I know the number of minutes difference in the classification, completion of the work also. Therefore, this is interval. Some of you have said it in the interval, it is correct. And then, which political party are you affiliated with? Independent, Republican, and Democratic. Here I'm just giving you this example because America is going through a lot of rough weather when it comes to political situation, which we are getting to see every day. So I thought instead of taking Indian parties, I don't want to be politically biased when it comes to Indian parties. So I took American parties. What is the answer for this? Answer should be nominal, yes. So this quick example has helped us to understand whether we have understood the different types of measurement scales or not. Okay. Then other possible measurement scales that you might be using in your questionnaire preparation could be classified into two categories, comparative scales and non-comparative scales. Within the comparative scales, we can have again different types of possible scales that we might design our questions with. One of the possible scales is paired comparison. What do I mean by paired comparison? Suppose I want to understand the features required or features the consumers would like to have in a new product. And I have identified 4 features which I want to build into the product. But I do not know which is the most preferred feature that the consumer would like to have in the product. Then I will give all possible combination of 2 features out of all the 4 features that I have identified as important and ask the respondent or ask the potential consumer to mark the feature that he or she would like to have in the product. So here we are comparing pairs of variables vis-a-vis other pair. For example, feature A and feature B as compared to feature A and feature C, or B and C. Among three possible features, which are the most preferred features, preferred features, if I want to understand, then I can use the paired comparison scale like this. For example, in a camera, what would be the expectation of a customer who would like to buy a camera? Is it the filter and the voice recorder, filter and the video recorder, or the video and the voice recorder? If most of the consumers would like to have voice recorder and video recorder, I would build these two into the product and allow the customer to have the filter maybe as an external feature. They can purchase that external feature if they require, otherwise they need not buy it. So I'll allow the gadget to download the filter as an external application, but I will not build it into the product feature in itself. So here we are trying to understand the mindset of the consumer by giving all possible alternative answers and thereby getting the consumer's mind revealed. Okay, again here please note, this is not going to give us the number as it is. It's only a qualitative response that we are trying to convert it into quantity in terms of how many percentage of people would like to have what combination of features. Okay, and then comes the rank order scale. When we talk about rank order scale, the earlier one also I showed you, we would like to understand the most preferred and the least preferred. Let us say I give three of the options like filter, voice recorder and the video recorder. Among these three, I would like the customers to give me an indication of what is the most preferred feature and the least preferred feature. So the most preferred might go as rank 1. Okay, I may not prefer this, will go as 2, and the least preferred will go as the third one. For example, it might so happen that the video recorder gets the first preference, rank 1, voice recorder gets the second rank, and the filter gets the third rank. Quite possible. So another example could be, if I want to store some beverages in my shop, among the 4 possible beverages, I would like to know which one is the most preferred and which one is the least preferred by the potential customers who visit my shop. So I try to assess the market by giving this type of a option. Assume that Pepsi gets rank 1, Coke gets rank 2, Thumbs Up gets rank 3 and Mountain Dew gets rank 4. Then I would like to have my inventory where Pepsi is most commonly available. Coke is also available, may not be as commonly as Pepsi, but Coke is available. Then Thumbs Up could be the next one, and I might give least preference to Mountain Dew by keeping my inventory, because I have some specific shelf wherein I have to store all the different beverages. So I have to optimize the shelf space. For that, I should know which one should be kept maximum and which one could be kept minimum. So this analysis can be quickly done by rank order scale. And then we talk about what is known as constant sum scale. The meaning of constant sum scale is, suppose when I talk about the ranking of these different beverages, it could be possible that somebody will not understand how to rank it. Instead, what we can do is, the total preference could be fixed as 100%. The total preference being 100, I would like to give a response to these 4 about what is the possible preference percentage. In that case, somebody might say, Pepsi, I would prefer 50% of the times. Coca-Cola, I would prefer 35% of the times. So 50 and 35 already is 85 is over. Thumbs up 10% of the times and Mountain Dew for 5% of the times. So again, here I'm trying to assess the preference of the customers, but not by giving a random ranking, but by restricting the total preference to some constant value. And within that, they will be able to give me the percentage of times they would prefer to have it. So that's about constant sum scale. One might design the questionnaire questions in any of these. And the next one is called Q-sort scale. In a Q-sort scale, when we are trying to compare, again assume that we are offering some 15 different products. Among the 15 different products, we can say the most preferred 3 and the least preferred 3. So I identify the most preferred 3 products and I identify the least preferred 3 products from multiple responses. Then I will know which is the top 3 and the bottom 3. When I collate all the responses together, I will know what is the top 3 preferences, what is the bottom 3 preferences. Now, thereby, I'm trying to divide or distribute or categorize the preference products based on the preference into 3 categories: most preferred, moderately preferred, and the least preferred. When I say moderately preferred, if I'm taking the top 3 and the bottom 3 out of 15, I'm left with 9. These 9 will be moderately preferred. Within those moderately preferred, if I want to really make it more intriguing type of a analysis, I might give them an option. The moderately preferred 9, among those 9, which could be the most preferred or the least preferred. Again, maybe I can ask them to put it in the rank order scale. So there are multiple combinations of questions types that we can ask in a questionnaire. And each of the questions that we ask should depend on a particular type of a scale of measurement. Because when I know the scale of the measurement, I know how to analyze the data. If I do not know what is the scale of measurement, I do not know how to analyze the data. And vis-a-vis, if I have to analyze the data using a particular tool, then the data that we collate for that tool should be on an appropriate scale. It's very important. We should not be applying any tool on any type of a scale. Then usually what happens, we end up getting wrong analysis and wrong interpretation. So we should be very careful in choosing the right scale. So this is about comparative scales. And there could be non-comparative scales, as I told you. Itemized rating scale. There is a difference between ranking and rating. Okay? Ranking is always in a particular order. Rating is against a benchmark. When I say rating, rating is always against a benchmark. But ranking is in a order. If 10 people participate, and if I want to rank the 10 people, then it's a relative scale. 1 is better than 2, 2 is better than 3, 3 is better than 4, and so on. That will be ranking scale. But when we use a rating scale, I would say among the 10 people, all those who score 80 and above are ranked as A. All those who score, let us say 50 and 80%, I'll categorize them as B. And all those who score below 50, I'll categorize them as C. Here, when I choose 10 participants, all the 10 might go into A or B or C. It is quite possible. Similarly, all of them might go to B, all of them might go to C, or any of them can go to ABC. This is called rating scale. So when we talk about rating scale, it's a non-comparative scale, but it will help us to evaluate the options. So it could be item by item. For every item, we might try to find out what is the rating given. The other possible is continuous rating scale. For example, when we have a scale in which The rating could be even in decimals or on a continuous scale, like a continuous variable. Then we are asking, or we are rating, or we are asking the respondents to give the responses on a continued fashion. Rather than calling it as 1, 2, 3, it could even go to 1.25, 3.26, 3.11, or 5.6. If my rating scale is between, on a scale of 1 to 10, if I ask somebody to identify their liking for a product on a scale of 1 to 10, that somebody who is responding might say, I like it 7.5 times out of 10. This is a continuous scale. And the very famous and the most commonly used scale is Likert scale. Classically, a Likert scale is a 5 unit response categorization scale. And here what happens, we go with minimum to maximum with a neutral in between. But sometimes there are problems with neutrality. The studies have shown again that there are lots of limitations or lots of demerits to Likert scale, even though that is one of the most commonly used interval scale in many research activities. There are lots of limitations, and there is a tendency of the respondent to go towards neutral. So to avoid that neutrality or the response neutrality, people have looked at modified versions of this. Instead of 5 responses, the responses can be divided into 4 responses or 6 responses. Usually we don't get to see more of 6 points. We get to see 4, or sometimes people even further reduce it to 3. And if it becomes a 2 response scale, it becomes a bipolar. So people don't look into bipolar. So Likert scale could be another tool which I am very sure all of you would be using it when you are looking at designing your questionnaire. And the other possible scale is semantic differential scale. In a semantic differential scale, we look at 2 extreme points, and in between we will have 7 points, or rather in between we will have 5 points. So extremely high value, extremely low value, or opposite values. When we say bipolar, it's basically extremely opposite. For example, on one side we would say aesthetic. On the other side, we will say what could be the extremely this one point for sadness. On one side, I'm extremely happy, and on the other side, I'm extremely unhappy. These are 2 bipolar points, and in between there is a neutrality. I'm neither happy nor unhappy. So I have 1 point extremely onto the left, middle, and extremely to the right. And between the middle and the right, between the middle and the left, there could be 2 more points considered. So this type of a scale is called as semantic differential scale. Now, when to choose which scale depends upon the type of variable we are dealing with and the type of tool that we want to use for analysis, and finally the objective for which we are collecting the data. When we collect the data, we should be very clear in our mind what are we going to do with that data. How is it going to answer some of my research questions? If I have an answer to that question, then I will be able to use the right variable, the right scale of measurement to collect the data of the variable, and also use the right tool for analysis. Okay, meanwhile, I remembered that there was a question asked before the session ended earlier. Can you please repeat that question, if I can answer that and then move forward? Okay, I think this would have erased the previous questions are already erased, so I can't make out the question. Like, can you Whoever had asked the question, can you repeat that, please? Okay. I don't know how many of you are aware of NAAC grades. NAAC is a National Assessment and Accreditation Council, which grades higher educational institutions like universities and colleges on a scale of 1 to 4. Okay. On a scale of 1 to 4, they grade the higher educational institutions. So can you tell me whether it is an itemized rating scale or a continuous rating scale or a Likert scale or a semantic differential scale? It's a scale of 1 to 4. Colleges might end up getting 2.51 or 3.71 or 3.26, 1.58, anything. So if that is the type of grades the higher education institutions are given, what type of a scale are they using? Is it itemized ranking rating scale or continuous, or it is Likert? What it could be? Okay, 2 of you have answered it as continuous and it is correct. Let us look at this. How often do you jump the traffic signal? What type of a scaling is this? Likert scale is one of the answers. Okay, one quick addition to whatever I was saying. Likert scale is an interval scale. Let us also keep that in mind. And in an interval scale, the difference between the successive 2 points on the scale is constant. So can that be Likert scale? Is the difference between never and rarely same as rarely and frequently, or frequently and always? Is the difference same? Somebody is saying yes. How do I differentiate never and rarely? For me, rarely means once in a week. But for somebody else, rarely means once in a month. And for somebody, rarely means maybe once in a year. But rarely is definitely something which says, at least you can expect the person to do this particular act as compared to somebody who is saying never. So think about it. Let us meanwhile look into this. What about this? Poor, average, good and excellent. Frequency scale. There is nothing called frequency scale. We don't have something called frequency scale. Though it indicates the frequency. It indicates frequency, but there is nothing called frequency scale. Usually what happens when we talk about poor, average, good and excellent, we would have a predetermined upper limit and the lower limit. Okay. As I told you, it's like giving grade A, B, C, D. So What does that semantic differential scale know? It is not semantic differential scale. Likert scale. Is it about the, okay, let me come back to this. Never, rarely, frequently, always is not actually a Likert scale. It could be referred to as a rating scale. If I look at it as always, I rate it as the highest. On the other hand, when I'm looking at poor, average, good, and excellent, if I say up to 25% performance is poor, 25 to 50 is average, 50 to 75 is good, 75 to 100% is excellent. If I have this type of a predetermined scaling, then I can call it as a Likert scale. And sometimes this is referred to as a 4-point Likert scale. Let us look at another example. How about this? Experience of watching a cinema on a OTT, on a multiplex situation, or in a regular cinema theater, or in a television. Of course, here I've given only 3. You can have many more. What about this example? If I'm asking the respondents to respond with their option, let us say experience of watching cinema on OTT. Somebody will tick it as 4. Multiplex, maybe somebody will tick it as 3. TV, somebody will tick it as 1. Maybe 1 being the least good experience, 4 being the highest good experience, 4 being the best experience. Will that be a Likert scale? Think about it and let me look at this. Okay, verbal frequency scale. You're talking about how frequently somebody says something, is it? When the respondent is unable or unwilling to give exact numbers. Okay, see, in all these examples that we're taking, we are trying to quantify a quality, which in itself is a challenge. I do not know what do I really mean by highly satisfied. I am actually unaware of what is the meaning of highly satisfied. But usually we say highly satisfied means 100% satisfaction, which is not true. Even if I'm 90% satisfied, I will say highly satisfied. So there is a challenge which says we are trying to quantify a quality. In itself, it is a challenge. The scale provides only an approximation of the frequency. Yes, that is a challenge. That's a limitation of any of these scales that we are talking about right now. And therefore, the best tool of measurement is the ratio scale, because it is the scale which determines and which captures the exact data. Okay, so in any of the research activity that you take up, it's always better that you try to devise your questions and your responses, questions especially for the variables, in such a way that you get the actual response rather than the approximated response. Okay, now coming back to this, training leads to efficiency improvement. What scale is this? This is again a 4-point Likert scale, which we usually get to see in many of the feedback, and mostly it's a feedback type of a question. In a feedback questionnaire, we usually use this type of a question or a scale of measurement. And this one, And nowadays in most of the malls, you get to see this type of a feedback collection. Immediately after you collect your products and pay the bill, they would display it on a screen and you can just press whatever you want to indicate. Very poor to very good. Again, sometimes you may look at this as a Likert scale with 5 points, or sometimes if I include 2 or more points in between, it might also be a semantic differential scale. So it is up to us to choose the right scale for the variable that you are trying to look at, and also for the purpose of which you have identified the, which you have collected the data, and how do you want to analyze. So these points will have an impact on the scale selection. Okay, any question on this before I go to the data editing part? Okay, it's already 3:40. So I would like to move to the next one if there are no questions. Okay, shall we move to the next point then, the data editing? Hello? Okay, since I did not get any questions, so we'll move on to the next component of the discussion, that is data editing. Now, have we all understood what is data? And especially in today's context, we talk about big data. And one of the very important features that we talk about in big data is variety of data. We talk about velocity, variety, veracity, and then variation, velocity, so on and so forth. We talk about 4 to 5 V's when we talk about big data. So when we talk about big data, or sorry, any data for that matter, we have understood what is data. I hope all of us understand the word data. And what are the sources for data? One of the sources for data is primary source. Do we all understand what is primary source? What is primary source? How do we understand the word primary source? Yeah, there are two types, primary and secondary source. What is primary source and what is secondary source? Or what is primary data and what is secondary data? Okay, first-hand data is primary data. Yeah, that colloquially we say yes, first-hand data. The collected data first time by the respondent, correct. When the data is collected for a particular variable by the enumerator, we will use the word enumerator. Researchers do the research, but data collection, the person who collects the data is usually referred to as a enumerator. So when the enumerator collects the data for the variables under study, we call it as primary data. And the source from where we collect the data, it could be individual respondents, or it could be organizations, or it could be governments, it could be institutions. From wherever we collect the data for the first time for the variable, we call it as primary data. And when we collect the data, what happens? We usually collect the data in the raw form. What is raw data? What is raw data? Raw data is the data which we just collect and collate as responses from many respondents. If we do not organize the data in any fashion, keep the data as it comes in, then it is called raw data. But raw data cannot be analyzed, cannot be understood. It is like a salad. You have fruits, you have nuts, you have sauces, you have sourness, you have bitterness, everything. We may not be able to really take out one ingredient out of it and then say this is what is the property of this ingredient, because it's all mixed together. So what happens? We need to group them. We need to group them. For grouping them, we do the classification, and when we do the classification, we also clean the data. So when we talk about data editing, we do the data editing primarily for primary data to convert raw data into group data and to convert raw data into useful data, and finally which will help us to do the analysis part later. So data editing is extremely important when it comes to primary data, and most of the research in case of social sciences deal with primary data. You might be doing the research for the first time for that particular topic, or even if it is a repetitive data, you collect the data afresh after a particular time, which we might call it as longitudinal data, cross-sectional data, whatever. So data editing deals with these steps, and the data might also come from the other source called secondary source. So when we look at the secondary source, again I'll not go into the details of what are the limitations and merits of secondary source, but we deal with processed data. Secondary sources we get processed data. Meaning of processed data is the data that we get from the secondary source could already be presented in the form of a table or a graph or a model, mathematical model. So in this case, what happens? We may not have big scope to see whether the data is correct or not, accurate or not, but still we need to do some verifications. The process of dealing with this data, which helps us in getting ourselves prepared for analysis, is data editing. So in case of data editing, how do we understand the word data editing? Data editing is the process of verification or scrutiny of the available data which we have collected through response questionnaires or observations or interviews or schedules or whatever is the tool that you have used for data collection, for legibility, for accuracy, for at the end of the day coding of the data, so that we get our data prepared for analysis. As I mentioned earlier, it helps us in doing the analysis. Sometimes what happens, without our knowledge, some data might go missing. The data editing part will help us even to identify if the data is missing or not. And it also helps us in coming up with possible options to identify a replacement for the missing data. And also it helps us in standardizing our data and preparing it for analysis. So the data editing as a process helps us in preparing our raw data into the data which can be analyzed. Okay, this is the basic work of data editing process. But there are lots of technicalities that we use, which I'll not be going into the details here. But roughly, if I understand what is data editing, it's a process of cleaning the data for omissions, irrelevant observations, or unconvincing information, and making it ready for analysis. And sometimes we may also do the data editing to check if the units of measurements have been properly taken or not, to see whether the units of measurements have been understood properly by the respondents or not. Of course, there is always an argument that the data editing is like a post-mortem. You have already done the data collection, now you are looking at data editing, and then you may really not end up having the right process for the analysis. But lot of precautions can be taken while doing the questionnaire design. In spite of taking all the precautions, there is definitely a need for data cleaning or data analysis before we do the analysis. So that stage between completion of the data collection to starting of the data analysis part is data editing. And here, these are some of the things that we need to keep in mind. That is, the units of measurement also gets scrutinized. And sometimes while recording the data or while entering the data into a computer, if at all we are using a computer system, we might do some typographic errors, means writing errors or typographic errors. While data editing process happens, it will also help us to see if there are any such typographic errors. And it will also help us to do data validation and enhancement. Enhancement because we remove the unwanted data, we remove the irrelevant data, thereby enhancing the quality of the data. So data editing is basically a process of enhancing the quality of the data that we deal with. So when we talk about data editing, we do editing for many different purposes. One, the first important reason why we need to do data editing is uniformity. What do I mean by uniformity? Let me take a simple example. In your questionnaire, you might have asked the question like, what is the annual income? What is the annual income? When we write what is the annual income and give a blank, the answer is, the question is like an open-ended question, as we discussed in the previous session. It's an open-ended question. The respondent might give answers like, the annual income is 3.5 lakhs. The respondent might have given it as 3.5 lakhs is one answer. Another respondent might have given it as 350,000, right? 3,50,000. Some other person would have given it as 3,50,000 in words. So there are different respondents giving you different types of answers. So all the answers are correct. The way it is given is different. So while doing the data editing, we'll get to notice that, and we'll try to bring all the answers into one particular standard format. So data editing deals with bringing in the uniformity of the data. And next important reason why we do data editing is for making sure that the data that we are dealing with is valid for the purpose of its collection and analysis. Sometimes we might have collected the data which may not be really valid for the purpose for which we are going to use this information or the data. And also, in some other cases, the data validity could be as a relative term to time. We might have collected data which could be no more relevant to the current time point. So we need to look at the validity of the data before we analyze. The third point is accuracy. Yes, we collect the data, but is it properly recorded? Is it the right data that we are collecting? For example, somebody might say that person is, just for the sake of an example, hypothetically, somebody is 18 years old and married with 3 children. It may not really sound correct. We might have missed the positions of the data entry. We might have missed the respondent's information, or we might have wrongly recorded the information for one of the variables. any of such things might have happened. Because of which we see that like naturally we believe a 18-year-old person may not be married with already 18 children. Sorry, 3 children. It's very rare to find such, or maybe almost impossible to find such information. Then you might see, okay, was it 18 years or 28 years? Or 18 years or 38 years? Did we go wrong in entering the data? This validation for accuracy can also be brought in data editing. When we find that the data is missing the accuracy, there are again some standard procedures which can be used to rectify the error. And in some cases, enumerator will go back to the respondents wherever it is possible and collect the right information. But the data editing process will help us to understand whether the data is accurately written down or not. And then comes the completeness. Many a times it's a common problem that when we send out a questionnaire, sometimes the respondents answer some questions and will omit the other. They do not respond to some of the questions. Then, while entering the data, while editing the data, we will understand whether the questionnaire is completely answered or not. However, in respect to the objective or the type of study that we are doing, if all relevant variables are answered by the respondents and some variables are not answered but still that will not affect our final analysis, then we still may consider it as completeness. But if the respondent has not answered to those variables and questions which are going to have an impact on our analysis, then it is referred to as incomplete. So, to decide whether the respondent's response is complete or not, again we need to keep in mind what is the purpose of collecting the data and what analysis are we going to do with that data. Then we will decide whether the data is complete or not. So the data editing process, the cleaning process will also help us to see whether the data is complete or not. And then comes consistency. Most often what happens, we deal with something called outliers. Outliers are those values which are extremely high values or extremely low values. Consistency, looking at consistency or data editing with the consistency in the mind will help us to know whether such outliers are noticed in the responses or not. And we try to eliminate those outliers because those outliers might positively or negatively lead to a positive or negative bias in the final responses or final results. So data editing helps us to see whether the consistency in the responses in the data is seen or not, and accordingly decisions could be taken. So data editing should help us to get our data ready for the analysis by checking for uniformity, checking for the validity, accuracy, completeness and consistency. And since we want all of this, we need to keep certain points in mind while cleaning the data. Our data cleaning process should help us in removing unwanted observations. How do we decide whether it is wanted or unwanted? If it is invalid, we remove. We say it is unwanted. Sometimes we see that it is not accurate, we remove. Some questionnaires not complete, remove. Some outliers not inconsistent with other possible answers, remove. So we understand whether the data is wanted or unwanted observation. So it helps us in removing the unwanted observations. And in some cases, there could be possibility of duplications. While entering the data, somebody would have entered it twice, or somebody would have entered it same respondents, but some other answer. Some type of a duplication could be there. We remove all those duplications. And in some cases, it also helps us to identify irrelevant and then irrelevant or unwanted and remove. And in many cases, we need to keep in mind the data, fix the data structure. What do I mean by fix the data structure? The meaning of fixing the data structure is some data, we fix it as numerical with 2 decimal points. And in some cases, we might call it as a string. Or some data points, we might call it as a date format. Each of these formats should be predetermined, and while getting our data ready for the analysis, we should be very clear about what type of a data is this. And also we know, we dealt with earlier nominal, ordinal, interval and ratio scale. Keeping in mind the statistical analysis that we are going to do for the data, we should know whether it is a nominal data or an ordinal data or a ratio scale data. Interval scale and ratio scale put together is usually referred to as metric scale, and metric scale data can be used for, is suitable for many different analysis. So we fix the data structure before we go into analysis. And as I already told, we should have a definition for outlier before we start eliminating the outliers, and based on the definition, we identify the outliers and eliminate it. And missing data, again, what is missing data and how do we fix the missing data? Again, it's a concept in itself. There are lots of approaches available, statistical approaches available for fixing the missing data. This will be again predetermined. Based on the type of data that we have, we will see how many missing data are there, and then should we really go ahead with a model for missing data identification, or should we replace it with some, what should I say, approximate value, or should we go with a statistical method? All these things can be determined while editing the data. And we can also decide about dropping the missing values. For example, if the data is not complete, then maybe we will drop the whole respondent's response or the questionnaire itself. All these are possible while editing the data. And once we do the editing part of the data, we look into what is called as coding. Have you heard of the word coding of data? Are you aware of coding? Yes. Okay. So usually what happens, if we want to do the analysis using any of the statistical softwares, which you might be aware of, we do the coding part of the variable before we start with the analysis. If somebody says, do you like to eat pizza? Let us say this is my question in a questionnaire. Do you like to eat pizza? Somebody says yes, somebody says no. This is a very nominal data, classic grouping type of a data. But in a statistical analysis, I cannot simply analyze yes, analyze no. Instead, I can code it as yes as 1, no as 2. Once I code yes as 1 and no as 2, I can count the number of yeses and count the number of no's, take the percentage of yeses, percentage of no's. I can make a 2 by 2 contingency table. I can do some analysis using this coded information. So, coding is nothing but the process of transforming the collected information and observations to some meaningful and cohesive categories. As I told you, I code yes as 1 and put them in one category. I code no as 2 and put them into another category. Similarly, maybe I'll code girl or female as one category, let us say 1, and male or boy, male as category 2. So I easily code it as 1 and 2 and put it as 2 categories. Now, is it that like only qualitative variables or nominal variables are coded? Answer is no. Even continuous variables can be coded. For example, we looked at the height example in the earlier slide. Which weight category you belong to, not the height, weight category you belong to. So I'm putting less than 40 kgs into 1, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, 80 and above. Let us say I make it into these 4 or 5 groups. I code the first one, less than 40 as 1, 40 to 60 as 2, 60 to 80 as 3 and 80 and above as 4. Even this type of coding can be done. And many a times we do this when we do the analysis, data analysis. Or sometimes it could be even that like I asked the open-ended question like, what is your weight? Different people would have given different answers. Some would have given weight in kg, some would have given in pounds, and some other person in some other unit of measurement. One, we look at the uniformity while editing, and also we try to code it. When we code the data, I will classify them into reasonable categories. Let us say less than 40, 40 to 50, 50 to 60, 60 to 70 and above 70, and put them into different classes. That will help me to do the analysis data. So coding is basically a process of representing the information using some symbols or using some numerical values. So it depends both on the type of variable and the type of questions asked. If qualitative variables are being dealt with, then definitely coding should be done. And in case of quantitative variable also, if the categories need to be found out for the type of variable, for the variable under study, then also we do the coding. And if the questions are open-ended questions, then the coding comes later, because we may not know what type of answers are going to be given by the respondents. So the respondents' responses will be tabulated. It's like a test tabulation. Means we try to collate all the answers and put it into different categories. And based on that, develop a scheme of coding. And using that scheme of coding, code the remaining information. In case of qualitative and quantitative, usually while preparing the questionnaire itself, we also develop a manual called coding manual. Whoever does the data entry part should have this coding manual with them along with the data. Otherwise, there are possibilities that the coding goes wrong and therefore the analysis also goes wrong. It's very important to have appropriate coding for qualitative and quantitative data so that we don't miss out on the information and also do the appropriate analysis. And continuing with data editing, data coding, many a times there are lots of limitations that we need to keep in mind. Many a times while we try to do the data editing, subjectivity might come into play or come into picture. Some data entry operators or some researchers might code the responses in a particular way, whereas the other might do it in a completely different way. So it's very important that we do a coding manual. I'm repeating, the coding manual, and follow the coding, especially when we are coding the qualitative and quantitative variables. Otherwise, subjectivity might ruin the quality of the data that we are dealing with. And another very important shortcoming could be the process adopted or the policy adopted to replace or eliminate the missing values. It might still lead to bias, positive or negative bias in the final results or final analysis. So if we are able to keep these two points in mind and design the editing part, The data editing should help us in enhancing the quality of the data that we have, which finally goes into data analysis. Any questions? Any questions you have? About data editing and data coding? No? Okay, then shall we move on to the last part of it? Tools for data collection. Okay. When we talk about e-tools for data collection, there are broadly two types of tools available. One is called the online tool and the other one is called offline tool. Please note, here we are talking about e-tools, but still we are talking about offline tools. The reason being very simple. In an online data collection tool, while doing the data collection part, to create a questionnaire, to collect the data, and to send or receive the information or data, we need the internet connectivity. Means we can do the creation, collection, and sending and receiving activity only in the presence of internet. If that is the case, we call it as online. On the other hand, there are many apps available which you can simply download when you have the internet connectivity, but use it even when you do not have the internet connectivity. You can create the questionnaire, you can collect the data in the field when you don't have internet connectivity. You can still make use of the available app and collect the data required in the absence of internet, and that's why it is called offline. There are many tools available, which I'm going to give you a list. Keeping in mind the time allotted, I did not get into the details of each one of them, but it's very easy that you will get to have these tools available online. You can always visit. However, I'm just giving you the list here, which will help you to do the data collection part. Here, what happens when it comes to online data collection tools? The advantage is when we are using an internet connectivity for creation, collection, and sending and receiving of information, there is no geographical boundary. As we are experiencing right now, I'm sitting in Bangalore, you're all in Varanasi, but still we are able to communicate. It is because of the internet connectivity that we use, and we are discussing it online. Now, once the live sessions are over, if you have recorded this version and download the recording, you can always look at the recorded version anytime. This is offline. But offline has a geography limitation. When we have online, I can sit in Bangalore, send my send my questionnaire to somebody who is sitting in any part of the world, and then request them to respond to my questionnaire. So there is no geographical boundary when we talk about online. And also another big advantage about online data collection tools, including Google Forms and Survey Monkeys and all of that, which you are very much aware of. Basic reports get generated automatically, and it is so dynamic that if there are new responses, keeping that new responses in mind, the reports get reorganized, right? So it becomes very handy for the user to get a glimpse of the trends and tendencies in the responses of the respondents. So online data collection tools helps us in having the first stage of reports. Whereas in the other case, that is the offline case, we need the internet connectivity to upload the data. We may only collect the data in the absence of internet, but if we want to, we call it as now live streaming. We may not be able to live stream it, but we stream it later in the presence of internet. However, since it is an offline activity, the app that we download can help us in collecting the data in a particular geographical area. We may have to go to the field, use that app and collect the data. So it only helps us in recording the information, but not doing anything beyond that. And this will also not help us in automatically generating the report. And the reports are usually not dynamic because it cannot update the information as and when we provide it. So some of the examples you can see here, like Google Forms, SurveyMonkey, and many more I'm going to give you list, are examples for online data collection tools, whereas TeamScope, GoSurvey, Open Data Kit, and many more, which I'm going to again give you a list with, are offline data collection tools. Now, other than that, you can also visit some of the websites which are mentioned here, which will help you to collect the data online. And these websites also have some type of a linkage with the industry in which these websites operate and help us in collecting the information from the relevant industry. And some of the easy to use and we call it as some open source wherein there is no need to pay money, but still you can use these survey tools are also available. So you can have a look at these list of e-tools for data collection. And here you can notice in the blue colored list, some of them are indicated as open source. Then do we think that like others are not open source? For the test purpose, it's open source. But if you want to have the full version, you need to pay money and collect. Whereas Line Survey and Typeform are full versions are also basically open sources. So these open sources and online and offline applications are available for all of us to collect the data. But of course, some of them will come with even templates for questionnaires of different types. If it is for feedback, if it is for training analysis, effectiveness of the training analysis, like that, some specific questionnaires which can be used as templates are also made available on each of these, or sorry, not each one of them, some of the websites that we get to see and the applications that we get to have. So we can use any one of them based on the relevance and appropriateness of these tools, what they offer us, and what we want out of the research, so that we collect the data and go back to analysis. I think this is what I wanted to share with all of you. If there are any questions, maybe we can discuss for some time. Okay, I'm on time, 4:20. We have 10 more minutes to go. Anything that you would like to ask? Any questions from online data collection tools 2? What does it mean? Can you elaborate the question, please? I'm not able to understand the question. There is a question. Yes, please. Yeah, you can ask the question. If you can tell me, if you can elaborate the question, I think I'll understand the question so that I can answer. think somebody wrote something here. Let me just check. I mean,
Ma'am,
from
Abhishek Singh has written some.
yeah, I mean, from collecting to representing, if the topic is related with studying the consumer behavior in a particular type of stores, should I use the online data collection tools? No. If you are doing it for one particular store, then there is no need for online. It's always better you go to the shop, go to the field, do the collection yourself. That's always better. Which data collection? Okay, I think I missed some of the statements before this. Let me read that. Kindly suggest some free tools for end-to-end data analysis tool. Let me tell you, don't depend too much on such end-to-end data analysis, because anything that the machine does can give you only the basics. It will not understand the reason why you are collecting the data or analyzing the data. It's always the researcher who need to decide it. So better you do the analysis yourself and use the tools available for analysis. It could be R programming, it could be SPSS, it could be SAS, any of those tools, but I would suggest you to do the analysis yourself. Kindly suggest some free tools. Okay. Which data collection will be more authentic and unbiased? Which data collection process? See, data collection process per se, the authenticity and unbiasedness in data collection depends on the tool that you have generated, meaning whether you have done a questionnaire or you are doing a measurement scale or you are doing an interview or doing an observation. Each one of these tools for data collection should be pilot tested before you go into the full-fledged data collection. So there is no one tool which can give you authentic and unbiased data. It depends completely on your variables and the objective of the study. So it's, at least for me, I don't think there is one single tool which can be authentic and unbiased. I think that's the question. Any other question? Which tool should be used to analyze it? Okay, I think this is a very, very important question. How do we know which tool should be used to analyze the data? Some of the important ideas that you need to keep in mind while choosing the tool for analyzing the data are, very first, the object of your study. You need to be very clear about what is that I'm trying to conclude, or what is that I'm trying to answer. If your questions are very clear, then you know what is that you are searching for. That is one thing which you need to be very clear about. And then each tool, sorry, each tool has application to a specific type of data, and each tool will give you some specific type of results. For example, let us say in a very broad sense, you use the concept of hypothesis testing. If you are using hypothesis testing, again in hypothesis testing, there are many different tools available. But broadly, if you are looking at hypothesis testing, you should first know whether I should use hypothesis testing or not. That depends on your objective and the type of variables you are trying to relate. If hypothesis testing is relevant to your research, then the next question is which procedure of hypothesis testing you should use, whether it is parametric or non-parametric. If you have quantitative variables, go with parametric. If you have qualitative variables, you will go with non-parametric. And within quantitative, again, there are many. So, depending upon your hypothesis, you should be able to choose the appropriate hypothesis testing procedure. More than this, I think it will be difficult to generalize too much to answer that question. But from the context of what we have discussed in the last two sessions, the session and the previous session, whichever tool you want to analyze, the first important requirement is the objective of the study and the relevance of the variable type. If you have a nominal variable, you can't use hypothesis testing, you can't use correlation study, you can't use designs of experiments, you can't use any of them. So the variable type, objective, and your type of analysis determines your type of analysis. I think that could be a broad general answer to that question. Anything else?
Is there any question? Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. I think there is no any question further.
What are the best data collection tools for combination research? Again, this is a very broad question to answer. Depends on whether you are using what type of a research design you are using leads you to the data collection tool. That could be the generic answer that I can give at this point of time. You might have to use observation and administered questionnaire, or you might have to use focus study group with experimentation. Again, it's a very difficult question to answer in a generic way. So research design helps you to identify the research data collection tool. Maybe what we can do is like, if you have any of these questions, you can post it on my email. I will try to answer. I think some of the questions that I'm getting to see need a lot of explanation, which I may not be able to do it right now.
Okay, ma'am. That's fine, ma'am. The students will actually give the questions posted on your email. Thank you
Sure.
so much, ma'am. I just call the convener of this workshop and HOD Department of Commerce to just please present the vote of thanks to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Professor Veena. We are
Thank you so much, sir.
to you for delivering lectures, sessions, and till now we have a very good feedback from the students also. Whatever the further feedback we will give to you. So we hope we will have our connection in the future also. Very
Sure, sir.
I and the whole department is highly obliged to you, madam. Good evening, madam. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I hope I've added some value to the participants.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm signing off this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay.